Welcome back to another video on RIP News. Over the past 24 hours, the world has bid farewell to some truly extraordinary individuals. Today, we pause to remember their lives, honor their memories, and reflect on the legacies they leave behind. If their stories have touched your heart, we humbly ask you to show your support by liking this video, a small gesture of respect for lives that meant so much to so many. Thank you for being here. Some faces are born to be remembered, even if the world only sees them for a moment. He came like a whisper and vanished like a storm, but the echo of his presence never faded. He was mysterious, magnetic, and rebellious without trying to be. For years, people only knew the symbol, a red jacket, a distant stare, a cigarette hanging from his lips. But behind that image was a young man named James Byron Dean, fragile, complex, and aching to be understood. James Dean was born on February 8, 1931, in Marion, Indiana. His early life was filled with love and tragedy. When he was just 9 years old, his mother, whom he adored, died of cancer. Her death shattered him. His father sent him away to live with relatives on a farm in Fairmount, Indiana. There, Dean grew up feeling disconnected and alone, but he also developed a deep imagination, escaping through art, drama, and speed. He was fascinated by bullfighting, car racing, and the works of Shakespeare. Even as a teenager, there was a strange fire in him, a hunger to feel deeply, to express what others were afraid to admit. He moved to California and studied drama at UCLA, but Los Angeles never felt like home. He was more drawn to New York, the home of serious acting and real emotion. At the Actors Studio, he trained under the legendary Lee Strasberg and immersed himself in method acting, which demanded raw, emotional truth. He absorbed it like a sponge. Dean wasn't interested in pretending. He wanted to live every moment on screen as if it were his own. Directors quickly noticed him. He was different, brooding, intense, unpredictable, but utterly mesmerizing. In 1955, he starred in East of Eden, his first major film role. The performance was electric, tortured, beautiful, and real. He became the first actor to receive a posthumous Academy Award nomination for Best Actor. But that was just the beginning. His next film, Rebel Without a Cause, turned him into an icon. As Jim Stark, he gave voice to an entire generation of misunderstood youth. Teenagers everywhere saw themselves in him, lost, angry, looking for love in a world that didn't listen. His third and final film, Giant, showed his maturity as an actor, playing a poor ranch hand who rises in wealth but remains emotionally broken. Dean's personal life was full of contradictions. He was shy but bold, private but provocative. He struggled with his identity, his fame, and the pressure to be something more than human. He often said he didn't expect to live long, and maybe, deep down, he knew. He loved fast cars and open roads, not for the thrill, but for the freedom. He once said, "Racing is the only time I feel whole." On September 30, 1955, James Dean was driving his Porsche 550 Spider, nicknamed Little Bastard, when he collided head-on with another car at an intersection in California. He was killed instantly. He was only 24. The world was stunned. 3 films. Just 3. That's all it took for him to become immortal. James Dean became a symbol of rebellion, youth, and raw emotion. His influence shaped Hollywood for decades. Actors like Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, and Leonardo DiCaprio have cited him as a major inspiration. But more than that, James Dean became a myth, a reminder that sometimes the brightest flames burn the shortest. His face is still printed on posters, his quotes still shared online, and his legacy still studied in film schools around the world. Perhaps that's the power of James Dean. He never gave us time to see him grow old. He never made bad movies. He never faded. He remains forever young, forever asking the world to understand what it means to feel. Dream as if you'll live forever. Live as if you'll die today. Those weren't just words. That was James Dean's life. And even in death, he continues to live, in dreams, in film, in memory. But James Dean was not the only soul who burned bright and left too soon. Stay with us, because in just a moment, we'll uncover the untold story of another legend, one whose journey was equally unforgettable. She survived war, carried secrets in her shoes, and smiled for a world that never truly knew her pain. History called her elegant, but her story was far more than style. She became one of the most beloved faces of the 20th century. Her image, a slender figure in a black dress, pearls around her neck, sunglasses hiding her soul, was everywhere. But before the world called her a fashion icon, before the cameras adored her, she was just a scared little girl running from bombs, holding on to dreams that seemed too fragile to survive. Her name was Audrey Hepburn. Born on May 4, 1929, in Brussels, Belgium, Audrey's early life was anything but glamorous. Her father abandoned the family when she was just 6. Then came World War II. While living in the Nazi-occupied Netherlands, young Audrey, then known as Etta van Heemstra, suffered severe malnutrition, witnessed cruelty, and carried coded messages for the Dutch resistance in her shoes. Behind her quiet demeanor was the heart of a survivor. These dark years would leave a permanent mark on her. She later said she could never cry in movies, because she had already seen too much sadness in real life. After the war, Audrey pursued ballet in London with dreams of becoming a prima ballerina. But malnourishment during the war had weakened her body, and her dream slipped away. Undeterred, she turned to acting, starting with minor roles in British films. Then, in 1953, everything changed. She was cast in Roman Holiday opposite Gregory Peck. The studio wanted a new, unknown face. What they got was magic. Audrey didn't just act, she lit up the screen. Her charm, innocence, and depth were unlike anything Hollywood had seen. That role won her an Academy Award for Best Actress and launched her into instant stardom. What followed was a string of unforgettable performances. Sabrina, 1954, Funny Face, 1957, The Nun's Story, 1959, Breakfast at Tiffany's, 1961, and My Fair Lady, 1964. She wasn't just playing characters, she was redefining femininity on screen. Unlike the bombshells of her era, Audrey brought vulnerability, dignity, and strength to every role. But behind the scenes, she faced heartbreak. Her first marriage to actor Mel Ferrer was troubled and eventually ended in divorce. She longed to be a mother, but suffered multiple miscarriages before giving birth to 2 sons. Fame, as she once said, didn't protect her from pain, it only made it harder to be seen for who she truly was. In the 1980s, Audrey stepped away from the spotlight and turned her attention to something far more personal, humanitarian work. As a goodwill ambassador for UNICEF, she traveled to Ethiopia, Sudan, Bangladesh, and Somalia, using her fame not for glamour, but to shine a light on suffering children. She never forgot what it felt like to be hungry, to be afraid. And now, she gave her voice to those who had none. In her final years, Audrey found peace in a small village in Switzerland, surrounded by her family and nature. But in 1992, she was diagnosed with a rare form of abdominal cancer. Despite her pain, she faced the end of her life with the same grace she had carried all along. Audrey Hepburn passed away on January 20, 1993, at the age of 63. The world mourned, not just the loss of a movie star, but of a rare human soul who had given so much light in a world that desperately needed it. Today, Audrey's legacy lives on not just in her films, but in the ideals she embodied: kindness, humility, and quiet strength. She once said, "As you grow older, you will discover that you have 2 hands, one for helping yourself, the other for helping others." That was Audrey Hepburn. More than an icon. More than an actress. She was a survivor, a fighter, and a light. And yet, she is not the only one. Because sometimes, the ones who change the world the most, are the ones we almost overlook. Stay with us, because next, we reveal the extraordinary story of another unforgettable legend. She was the most photographed woman in the world, but no one ever really saw her. She became an icon the moment she stepped into the spotlight, glowing, magnetic, irresistible. But behind the camera flashes and red lips was a woman trapped in a storm of fame, heartbreak, and misunderstood dreams. She was Marilyn Monroe, America's sweetheart, and yet, its most tragic mystery. Born as Norma Jean Mortensen on June 1, 1926, in Los Angeles, California, her life began in shadows. Her father vanished before she was born, and her mother was mentally unwell, placing Norma in a revolving door of foster homes and orphanages. She never knew stability. She never had a real childhood. All she had was hope, and the fantasy of being loved. She married at just 16 to escape the system, working in a munitions factory during World War II. It was there a photographer noticed her. That single moment turned her life upside down. She dyed her hair platinum blonde, adopted the name Marilyn Monroe, and stepped into a world that would both worship and destroy her. The 1950s became her era. Films like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, Some Like It Hot, and The 7-Year Itch made her a sensation. She was funny, charming, and exuded a kind of sensual innocence Hollywood had never seen. But what few knew, what few wanted to know, was how much it cost her. Marilyn wasn't just a sex symbol. She was deeply intelligent, well-read, and constantly pushing herself to be taken seriously as an actress. She trained at the Actors Studio in New York, craving respect in a world that only wanted her body, not her mind. Her performances in films like Bus Stop and The Misfits revealed a depth and vulnerability few expected. Yet behind her growing fame, Marilyn's personal life was falling apart. Her marriages to baseball legend Joe DiMaggio and playwright Arthur Miller were plagued by insecurity, pressure, and emotional distance. She battled anxiety, depression, insomnia. Pills became her crutch. Fame became her prison. She once said, "I'm not interested in money. I just want to be wonderful." And she was. But she was also tired of being misunderstood, of being used, of being alone in a crowd that only saw the surface. On August 5, 1962, Marilyn Monroe was found dead in her Los Angeles home. Official reports called it a probable suicide due to barbiturate overdose. She was just 36 years old. Her death shocked the world, but even more chilling was how expected it felt. Like a candle burning too bright, she was doomed to extinguish too soon. But Marilyn never truly disappeared. Her face still graces murals, magazine covers, and movie screens. Her image is immortal. And yet, her real story, the one of pain, resilience, and longing, often goes untold. She was fragile, but never weak. She was lonely, but never unloved. She was broken by the very industry she helped define. And in many ways, she represents every woman who's been underestimated, every person who's worn a smile to hide the storm inside. Marilyn Monroe wasn't just a star, she was a universe. And though her light was brief, it still reaches us, decades later, whispering, "See me. Know me. Remember me." And so we will. But hers is just one haunting tale in Hollywood's gallery of legends. Stay with us, because coming up next is another life, just as brilliant, just as heart-wrenching, waiting to be told. Sometimes, legends don't roar, they whisper through cigarette smoke and a stare that could stop time. He wasn't handsome by Hollywood standards. He didn't charm with flashy moves or sugar-coated lines. Instead, he stood still, stoic, cold, but deeply magnetic. And in that quiet intensity, He rewrote the rules of what it meant to be a leading man. To the world, he was bogey. To the screen, he was unforgettable. But behind that trench coat and gravelly voice was a man who spent a lifetime searching for peace, in a world that demanded toughness. Humphrey DeForest Bogart was born on December 25, 1899, in New York City, on Christmas Day. His father was a stern, well-known heart surgeon. His mother, a successful commercial artist. Yet his childhood was anything but merry. He grew up in a cold, emotionally distant home, where affection was rare, and expectations were suffocating. Sent to private schools, Bogart rebelled. He was expelled, enlisted in the Navy during World War I, and wandered through life with no clear direction, until he found the stage. His early acting career wasn't glamorous. He played small roles in Broadway productions and worked backstage. Hollywood came calling, but only with bit parts. He was often typecast as a gangster or the second guy. For years, it seemed like Bogart would never break through. And then, The Petrified Forest. His role as Duke Mantee, a cold-blooded outlaw, revealed something different. He wasn't just acting. He was being. The rawness, the danger, the tension, it was real. And suddenly, Hollywood saw it too. By the 1940s, Humphrey Bogart had become a giant. High Sierra, The Maltese Falcon, To Have and Have Not, each role hardened his screen presence, chiseling a persona that felt both dangerous and heartbreakingly human. But it was Casablanca that etched his name in cinematic immortality. As Rick Blaine, the wounded romantic caught between love and war, Bogart wasn't just acting. He was channeling a lifetime of regret, restraint, and resolve. "Here's looking at you, kid." The line was improvised, but it became a cultural landmark. Off-screen, Bogart was just as complicated. He had a quick temper, a sharp wit, and a taste for scotch. He married several times, but it wasn't until he met Lauren Bacall, 20 years younger, that he found what he called home. Their chemistry began on the set of To Have and Have Not, and never faded. Together, they became one of Hollywood's most iconic and sincere love stories. In 1951, Bogart delivered one of his greatest performances in The African Queen, opposite Katharine Hepburn, and won his first, and only, Academy Award. By then, he wasn't just a star, he was a symbol. The everyman who didn't need to shout. The romantic who wouldn't beg. The hero who was broken but brave. But behind the camera, time was catching up. Bogart was a heavy smoker and drinker. In the mid-1950s, he was diagnosed with esophageal cancer. He kept working, kept showing up with quiet dignity, even as his strength faded. He died on January 14, 1957, at the age of 57, with Lauren Bacall by his side, placing a small golden whistle in his coffin, the same one she gave him years earlier, engraved with their private code, "If you want anything, just whistle." Humphrey Bogart left behind more than just movies. He left behind a blueprint, for cool, for courage, for authenticity. He didn't need special effects or big speeches. He proved that less can be more, and silence can sometimes speak louder than words. To this day, his face still looms large on posters and cinema walls. His voice echoes in film noir halls. And his stare still cuts through the fog of time. He was bogey. Not perfect. Not polished. But permanent. And his legacy reminds us that in a world full of noise, sometimes the quietest man in the room leaves the loudest mark. But don't go just yet. Because another legend, equally complex, equally unforgettable, is waiting in the wings. Stay with us. The next story is about to begin. Some stars don't just shine, they burn, fierce, wild, and untamed, lighting up everything in their path until the world can't look away. She wasn't just a celebrity. She was a storm dressed in velvet. A diamond with a beating heart. A woman who ruled the screen, the headlines, and history itself. Yet beneath the crowns, the violet eyes, and the scandalous love affairs, there lived a soul that craved nothing more than to love, to feel, and to survive. This is not just the story of a movie star. This is the legend of Elizabeth Taylor. Born on February 27, 1932, in Hampstead, London, Elizabeth Rosamond Taylor was introduced to beauty and art from the very beginning. Her parents were Americans living abroad, her father an art dealer, her mother a former stage actress. But when World War II darkened Europe, the Taylors moved to Los Angeles, unknowingly placing their daughter in the very heart of what would soon become her kingdom, Hollywood. By age 10, Elizabeth had already caught the attention of studio executives. Her breakthrough came just 2 years later in the 1944 film National Velvet. With her luminous eyes and emotional depth, audiences instantly fell in love. But while the world saw a child star, Elizabeth felt the weight of adulthood far too early. Fame came fast, and so did the loss of a normal childhood. She was expected to grow up overnight, and she did. In her teenage years, Elizabeth blossomed into one of Hollywood's most beautiful young women. Her performances in films like A Place in the Sun and Father of the Bride showed that her talent was just as captivating as her looks. But behind the camera, she struggled with the expectations placed on her. She was pushed, polished, and paraded around like a porcelain doll, yet inside, she was fiercely independent. She once said, "I'm a very committed wife. And I should be committed too, for being married so many times." And marriage, oh, marriage, would become one of the most talked about themes of her life. Elizabeth Taylor was married 8 times to 7 different men. Her first marriage, at age 18, to hotel heir Conrad Hilton Jr., ended in heartbreak and abuse. But love, real, intense, flawed love, would come later, and it would shake the world. In the 1960s, Elizabeth starred in the most expensive film ever made at the time, Cleopatra. Not only was the film a spectacle of ancient luxury and power, but it also became the setting for one of the most famous love affairs in history. On set, she met Richard Burton, a Welsh actor with a voice like thunder and a soul as tormented as her own. Their chemistry was electric, dangerous, and impossible to hide. Their affair sparked international scandal. Both were married to other people, and the Vatican even condemned their relationship. But the world couldn't look away. They married in 1964, divorced in 1974, then married again in 1975, only to divorce once more. It was a love story written in passion, rage, and poetry. Richard once wrote to her, "You are, in short, exquisite. I would gladly sell my soul to write your name." But Elizabeth was more than a love story. She was a powerhouse actress. Her role in Butterfield 8 earned her an Academy Award, but it was her haunting performance in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? That cemented her as a dramatic force. She won her second Oscar for that role, playing a bitter, aging woman drowning in alcohol and regret. It was raw, messy, and real, so close to home that it blurred the line between character and self. Beyond the screen, Elizabeth battled demons of her own. She faced addiction, chronic illness, and near-death experiences. She underwent more than 30 major surgeries in her life. She broke her back, survived a brain tumor, overcame pneumonia, and even checked into rehab before it became common for celebrities to do so. But she never gave up. She always came back stronger. In the 1980s, after the tragic death of her friend Rock Hudson, Elizabeth Taylor became one of the first celebrities to speak out about AIDS. At a time when most remained silent, she used her fame to give voice to the voiceless. She founded the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation and helped raise over $270 million for research and care. Her activism broke barriers and saved lives, proving that her beauty was more than skin deep. It was compassionate, courageous, and fierce. Later in life, she remained a symbol of timeless glamour and resilience. She launched successful perfume lines, remained close to her children and grandchildren, and continued her charity work even as her health declined. And through it all, she never lost her sense of humor. She famously said, "Big girls need big diamonds," but what she gave the world was far more valuable than jewelry. On March 23, 2011, Elizabeth Taylor passed away at age 79. Even in death, she made an entrance. Her funeral began 15 minutes late, by her own instructions. Because in her words, she even wanted to be late to her own funeral. Elizabeth Taylor wasn't perfect. She never claimed to be. But she was real. Flawed, brilliant, bold, and unforgettable. She lived with intensity and loved with abandon. She defied Hollywood, rewrote the rules, and lived unapologetically. Her legacy isn't just in films or perfume bottles. It's in every woman who dares to live out loud, every voice raised for justice, and every soul that refuses to be silenced. She was fire wrapped in diamonds. A legend with a laugh that could disarm kings and eyes that saw deeper than any script. She wasn't just one of the greatest actresses of all time. She was a survivor, a warrior, a queen. And if you thought her story was powerful, stay with us. Because coming up next, we dive into the wild, magnetic, and heart-wrenching life of another Hollywood icon, one whose legacy still stirs the world. He didn't just act, he erupted. There are actors, and then there are forces of nature. Before him, Hollywood followed rules, polished, predictable, proper. But when he arrived, everything changed. He growled instead of spoke, sulked instead of smiled, and made silence louder than any monologue. To this day, no one forgets the first time they saw him. But behind that volcanic talent was a man haunted by demons, driven by rebellion, and desperate to be understood. This is the story of Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando Jr. was born on April 3, 1924, in Omaha, Nebraska. His childhood was turbulent. His father, a traveling pesticide salesman, was harsh and emotionally distant. His mother, an actress and alcoholic, introduced him to theater, but couldn't always protect him from the chaos at home. Young Brando struggled with discipline, often getting into trouble. At age 16, he was expelled from a military academy and drifted, unsure of his future. But acting, that was different. It gave him something no one else did, freedom to feel. In the early 1940s, Brando moved to New York and studied under the great Stella Adler. She introduced him to Stanislavski's method acting, drawing emotion from real experiences. Brando took it further. He didn't perform characters, he became them. His breakout role came in 1947 when he played Stanley Kowalski in Tennessee Williams' A Streetcar Named Desire on Broadway. It was raw, animalistic, unforgettable. When the film adaptation arrived in 1951, audiences were stunned. Brando's Stanley didn't fit the polished mold of leading men. He was primal, dangerous, sexual. It changed acting forever. From there, he soared. Viva Zapata! 1952, Julius Caesar, 1953, and On the Waterfront, 1954, cemented his dominance. In On the Waterfront, Brando delivered one of cinema's most quoted lines, "I could have been a contender." He won his first Academy Award for that performance. His acting felt so real it didn't seem like acting at all. But fame didn't sit well with Brando. He hated interviews, avoided red carpets, and often sabotaged his own career. After a string of commercial flops in the 1960s, many thought his reign was over. Hollywood moved on, or so it seemed. Then came The Godfather, 1972. Brando, nearly written off by the industry, transformed into Don Vito Corleone, the aging mafia patriarch whose presence dominated every frame. The studio didn't want him. They thought he was difficult, unpredictable. He responded by shoving cotton in his cheeks, lowering his voice, and reinventing screen presence. The performance earned him his second Oscar, but he famously refused it, protesting Hollywood's treatment of Native Americans. It was a shocking move, but so Brando. The following year, He appeared in Last Tango in Paris, 1973, a controversial, emotionally violent film that pushed the limits of cinema. Brando later admitted the experience left him emotionally scarred. The price of honesty in his performances was always personal pain. Off-screen, his life was stormy. Brando fathered at least 11 children, battled lawsuits, and suffered profound personal tragedy, including the murder of his daughter's boyfriend by his own son, and the suicide of that same daughter. His family life, like his career, was marked by turbulence and sorrow. Yet even into his later years, Brando remained magnetic. In Apocalypse Now, 1979, he played Colonel Kurtz, bloated, bald, and terrifying, emerging from shadow like a ghost from the soul of war itself. The film became iconic, and Brando again proved his presence was unmatched. By the 1990s, Brando had retreated from the spotlight, disillusioned with Hollywood and haunted by his past. He gave a few final performances, often eccentric, but never forgettable. He died on July 1, 2004, from respiratory failure at the age of 80. Marlon Brando wasn't just a movie star, he was a revolution. He dismantled the old world of acting and rebuilt it in his image, flawed, feral, and fearlessly real. His legacy lives in every actor who dares to dig deeper, to risk more, to bleed on screen for the sake of truth. He showed us that performance wasn't about pretending, it was about being. And in doing so, Marlon Brando didn't just change cinema. He became cinema. And as we close the chapter on the godfather of modern acting, a new story awaits. Stay with us, because up next, we explore another unforgettable soul, a legend who left their own mark on the world in ways no one expected. Some men don't just walk into history, they swagger in with a grin, a cigarette, and a presence that commands the room. You may not know his name right away, but you know the face, the voice, that confident stare and unforgettable charm. He was called the King of Hollywood, but his kingdom wasn't made of gold. It was built from hardship, ambition, and a desire to be more than just another face on the silver screen. This is the story of Clark Gable. Born William Clark Gable on February 1, 1901, in Cadiz, Ohio, his life began far from the glamour of Hollywood. His mother died when he was just 10 months old. Raised by his father and stepmother, Gable grew up in a working-class household, tough, modest, and filled with uncertainty. He dropped out of high school at 16 and took on a series of blue-collar jobs: oil field worker, tire salesman, horse groomer. But somewhere deep within him, a dream was brewing, a dream bigger than the factories and farmlands of Ohio. Gable found his calling in the theater. He joined a traveling troupe, doing odd jobs backstage and slowly making his way on stage. It wasn't easy. His looks were unconventional, his ears too large, his smile slightly crooked, but there was something raw, magnetic, and undeniably masculine about him. In the 1920s, he moved to Hollywood, but his rise was far from immediate. He started in silent films, took on bit parts, and worked as an extra. Rejection followed him at every turn. But Clark Gable refused to give up. He honed his craft, worked with acting coaches, and slowly began to develop a persona that would later become legendary. In 1931, at the age of 30, he finally caught the attention of MGM Studios. They saw in him what the audience would soon come to worship: a rugged charm, a deep voice, and a confidence that could melt hearts and intimidate rivals. His breakthrough came with Red Dust, 1932, opposite Jean Harlow. The chemistry was electric, the audience was hooked, and Gable became a star. Over the next few years, he dominated the screen in classics like It Happened One Night, for which he won the Academy Award for Best Actor, Mutiny on the Bounty, and San Francisco. But nothing would compare to what came next. In 1939, Clark Gable took on the role of Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind, a performance that would define his career and cement his place in cinematic history. The line, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn," became one of the most iconic quotes in film. Gable didn't just play Rhett Butler, he embodied him, strong-willed, passionate, and haunted by love. But Gable's personal life was filled with heartache. He married 5 times, but it was his third wife, actress Carole Lombard, who truly captured his heart. Their love story was tender, playful, and deeply romantic. Tragically, just 3 years into their marriage, Carole died in a plane crash while returning from a World War II war bond tour. Gable was devastated. He joined the U.S. Army Air Forces shortly after, flying combat missions during the war. It wasn't just patriotism, it was grief. After returning from the war, Gable resumed his career, but something had changed. He still starred in major films, Magambo, The Hucksters, Band of Angels, but the spark behind his eyes now carried a touch of sorrow. Hollywood was evolving. New stars were rising. But Clark Gable remained a symbol of a bygone era, masculine, magnetic, unapologetically himself. In 1960, while filming The Misfits, his final film, opposite Marilyn Monroe, Gable was already feeling the toll of years of smoking, stress, and physical strain. Just days after the film wrapped, on November 16, 1960, Clark Gable died of a heart attack. He was only 59. His death marked the end of an era. The world mourned the loss of a titan, a man who had risen from humble beginnings to become the embodiment of classic Hollywood masculinity. He was laid to rest beside Carole Lombard, finally reunited with the great love of his life. But even today, decades later, the legacy of Clark Gable lives on. Actors like George Clooney, Harrison Ford, and Brad Pitt have all drawn inspiration from him. His films continue to be studied, quoted, and adored by generations who never even saw them in theaters. Because Clark Gable wasn't just a movie star, he was a force of nature. He showed us that true charisma isn't about perfection, it's about presence. So the next time you hear that gravelly voice, see that half smile, or watch a man walk into a scene like he owns the world, remember, it all started with the king, Clark Gable. But don't go anywhere, because coming up next, we're stepping into the mysterious life of another Hollywood legend, one whose story is just as unforgettable.